Hi, everyone. So I'm Lillard Richardson, the Director of the School of Public Policy. I want to welcome everyone here to our first Student Internship Showcase. Not the way we all expected it when we started planning this over the last 2 years, but we are so excited to have our first cohort of students that have moved through the internship now here and part of the showcase. This will be a tremendous event. And I'm just so excited to have this happen. We want to obviously thank all of the preceptors who are here, who have generously given their time and energy and leadership and mentorship to the students. That is such a valuable service for us, and we truly appreciate that. If there are any alums out there, we certainly appreciate having you also on the for the showcase, and any other friends of the school. So it's really wonderful to have everyone here. The internship is possibly the most important part of what many students do during their education. It is an opportunity for them both to test out their own leadership, to also learn from some different leaders that aren't just the ones in the classroom. They oftentimes learn what they're good at, sometimes what they still need to work on, what they like, maybe what they don't like. And so it's oftentimes when I talk to alums, it was the pivotal experience in their entire graduate and oftentimes their entire education experience. And so we really do appreciate everyone who's given of their time for that. And I'm very excited to see, I mean, it is unbelievable with all the challenges we've had this spring with COVID and with the lockdown and everyone having to interview and work online, that so many students had such great experiences with some really great organizations that have very meaningful purposes to those organizations. And so I'm delighted to welcome everyone here. I want to thank everyone for being here, and I want to turn it over to Catherine.
Thank you so much, Lillard. As Lillard said, our internship program is such an important aspect of the professional development of all of our students. And it typically happens between the first and second year. And it's a wonderful opportunity for the students to apply what they've learned in the classroom. And they're doing it in 300 hours worth of work. So they spent the summer working very, very hard. It's been my privilege to work with this wonderful group of students, to watch them grow and learn as we move throughout the summer. And we are also incredibly proud and hope you enjoy hearing about their experiences today. I want to give you just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. Love the mask, Lillard.
You notice it has little paw prints on it. You might not be able to see that, but
very nice.
But I was going very Penn State here, so.
It's a great reminder of how we've had to be resilient. Internships typically are in person, and those internships presentations typically happen in person as well. So the original plan was to imagine yourselves circulating among a room full of students with posters on boards and easels where you could engage with them. The downside is we're not in person. The upside is we've been able to include so many more people, and our reach is so much greater by virtue of doing this virtual. So we've been learning a lot of pivots lately, and I appreciate everybody for being so resilient. So the couple of housekeeping items, we do encourage your participation today. When you do have a question or comment, type a question mark or the word question in the chat box at the bottom of the Zoom window anytime throughout the discussion. And our moderator, Whitney, will call on you so you can ask your question, or you may also type out your question in the chat window if you prefer to have Whitney ask that question for you. So as we get started, I'd like to thank the organizations and preceptors, and Whitney will be sharing a slide of all of them. Without these organizations and preceptors to guide these students, many of whom are present with us today, and I want to thank you for taking that extra time to join us, these internships wouldn't have been possible. Even with a pandemic, we were successful in placing 100% of our students because these organizations and preceptors were willing to pivot with us. So I really do want to include a special thank you to these organizations and preceptors and lead a little bit of a round of applause because we couldn't have done it without you. So without further ado, the people of the hour, I'll turn the program over to Whitney, our moderator, to get us started. Whitney?
Thanks so much, Catherine. We're really excited to have our first cohort be presenting this afternoon. And to get things started today, we are going to hear from Jonathan Ortiz, who had his internship with the United States Fish and Wildlife Service. So, Jonathan, take it away.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Whitney, for the introduction. Thank you guys for being here today. Thank you primarily to my boss, Lori Brown, for the mentorship this summer. It truly was a great experience, and I hope that by the end of my 5 minutes, you and everyone else can see what I was able to work on this summer. So this summer, I was able to work for the Department of Interior under one of their agencies, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. The U.S. Department of Interior is a cabinet-level agency that manages America's vast natural and cultural resources. Our department employs some 70,000 people, including expert scientists and resource management professionals. We employ those 70,000 people in 9 technical bureaus. Those bureaus include the Bureau of Indian Affairs, the Bureau of Indian Education, the Bureau of Land Management, the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, the Bureau of Reclamation, the National Park Service, obviously U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, U.S. Geological Survey, and the Office of Surface Mining, Reclamation, and Enforcement. So I say that just to let you guys give you an overview of what the Department of Interior does as a federal agency. The mission for the Department of Interior is to conserve and manage the nation's natural resources and cultural heritage for the benefit and enjoyment of the American people. So as an intern coming in, understanding this mission, it was really beneficial for me to compare not only the mission of our overall department, but as our agency, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So if you can follow my mouse here, the bottom left corner, that is the logo for the Department of Interior. Now, the mission for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is working with others to conserve, protect, and enhance fish, wildlife, and plants and their habitats for the continuing benefit of the American people. Excuse me. So going into this internship, I understood that I was going to be working, even though I was working on the Department of Interior, my official capacity was understanding not only the administrative side, but also environmental policy. And just to backpedal a little bit, my official title this summer was a pathway student. Just so you guys know, when an intern comes in the federal government, most of those interns' titles will be a pathways student. Now, in the first yellow block, you will see that I have the Midwest Region 3 at the bottom. That corner, the bottom right corner, is the region that the Fish and Wildlife Service separates all the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service all over the country, and we are in Region 3, and these include those states right there. Some of those states include Ohio, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Missouri, Illinois, Indiana. Some of my duties in my internship was vast, and I really, again, to Lori Brown, I really do appreciate that she put me hands-on on most of the meetings that I could attend. For those meetings, one that I had every week was I had weekly administrative meetings to discuss department objectives and needs from regional partners. So these meetings were conducted in a way that our director would start off just explaining her schedule from the weeks past and discuss what her goals were, what the goals were for us as an administration to move forward with, and the communications that she might have had, any concerns. Obviously, because of COVID-19, a lot of the concerns from the beginning of the summer were how we were handling employees, how we will handle facilities, and of course, our responsibilities. Some of my other duties were observe communication with other regional directors on a monthly basis. So think about it from my perspective. I'm an intern for the federal government, and I'm sitting there and okay, how do we communicate with one each other? How do we get goals accomplished? How do we not only pass on responsibilities, but how do we hold each other accountable? And some ways we did that was with, again, our regional directors. On a monthly basis, we had our meetings, and listening through there, of course, it was all over the phone. Nothing was in person again. It was really educational for me to see how a director not only communicates with everyone in the region. Again, if you look at the bottom left corner, that is the region that we are in, the Midwest Region 3. Communicating with all our employees and instilling confidence. And we are in this difficult situation now with the pandemic. And this is how we are going to get through this as a department, as an agency, as a region, and as an office. And as an intern, I was able to sit there and say, okay, we got this. It's difficult, but we are still going to be able to deliver to the American people what our federal agency is responsible for. So that's just some of those meetings. I also participated in some of our office meetings that were Thursdays and Fridays, and some of those was with our Fish and Wildlife Conservation Office, our Whitney's Genetics Lab, and our Fish Health Center. And the best way I can tell you guys about this is I was literally a fly on the wall. I was sitting there, and from the project leader communicating to her scientist, to her biologist, to everyone is, okay, this is the field work we need to do. We're all online right now. How can we accomplish this in a safe manner? And witnessing that, how, again, someone like as a project leader or director takes control and instills confidence in how we get the job done was really nourishing for me and something I could take away for the rest of my career. I also was able to participate in federal budget trainings with my supervisor, which included observing and getting hands-on experience on how to propose, direct, log, and manage the federal funds that we allocated as a department. So here I learned how we as a department put in an official request through Congress and through the president, the official steps for us to get our federal funding, and how once we receive that funding as a Department of Interior, how it's given now to the 9 agencies, and then how once it's given to the 9 agencies, how we as a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, how we allocate that money to everyone and to make sure that we accomplish our goals and keep up with our responsibilities. And those meetings were really, again, beneficial. My boss did a great job. We met, if not every week, every other week for a couple hours on hand. And she's been working in the federal government for a long time. So she was able to pass on a lot of wisdom and a lot of knowledge. And I was able to take a lot of notes on how you as a director, as an agency, request that funding. Now, to get to the highlights, because of course this was work, but there were a lot of highlights throughout my time this summer. And one of them was that I gained real world experience on the federal government's expectations for financing and budgeting for federal funds. Coming in as an administrative pathway student, an administrative support student, I honestly didn't, besides my grad courses on finance and budgeting, I really didn't have much knowledge on real world expectations besides my own budgeting, which as a 20-year-old college student, let's all be honest, we've all been in that situation before. And it was just learning how we all take the official process for everything, and seeing her reports, seeing how she logged all the spending. Weekly as an administrative office, we were able to, I was able to see all the emails, and the person in charge of our finances directly, she would send out emails, okay guys, I need credit card statements, credit card receipts. And then I saw those emails, and then I would call my boss, and I call her and she answers, and hey, I saw this email, what's the process for this? So one of my highlights is just being able to communicate, even though I'm remotely, and the position was in Wisconsin, even though I'm in PA, I was able to call her and she was able to help me. One of my other highlights was earning an understanding of environmental policy at the federal level. And I can tell you this, that environmental policy at the federal level really means you're working with local and state government to get everything done as a federal agency. I enjoyed talking to my boss and learning how we partnered with our local communities and in state departments to make sure that we met our responsibilities, but also shared our wealth. Wealth, I mean by resources. How we shared our resources and how we were able to help, quote unquote, the little guy, and how we were, it was really just a cycle of benefiting from all our hard work together. It wasn't like we just came in as a federal government said, give me this or give me that. It was, hey, these are the projects that we have. Are you able to help us? And in return, how can we help you? One of my other highlights was using that knowledge to analyze how state and local government environmental policy is structured based off federal policy. So for this, like I said, we worked together, but then it was sitting back and listening to my boss say, okay, once we help them out, this is how the state government or the local communities build their policies or build their practices based off of how we help them. So really, you're seeing how just because one agency or one department has information or resources, we don't keep it to ourselves. We truly are united and try to spread it, and that affects policy change. And last but not least, one of my highlights was understanding the basic structure of administration from the intern/assistant to director. Coming in as an administrative support, it was just a lot. You have a lot of responsibilities. You're in charge of not only a lot of people, a lot of projects, and you're responsible to them, but then you also have to report to somebody else. And seeing that, witnessing that, and being hands-on, okay, take care of these projects. And hey, by the way, I have this meeting, why don't you sit in? Or hey, we're interviewing for some of these administrative positions. Would you like to sit in? Don't ask any questions to the interviewee. Okay, I got it. But it was nice. It was coming in, I wanted to gain a lot of experience in administration, because even though my interest is in criminology and criminal justice, I still see myself working in administration at some point in my career. And this internship really has helped me and will continue to help me as I continue for the year. And I'm really excited, not only for the projects that I've been put on, but for the leadership structure that I report to and that I'm in. And just seeing how everyone works collectively really has been beneficial. And now opening up for questions.
Great. And we have a few for you, John. I just want you to know we've had several coming in. First of all, I wanted to let you know that Lillard Richardson, our director, wanted to ask you what leadership lesson or moment had the most impact on you?
Leadership moment had the most impact on me. I would say really when I explained to my boss, I think it was the first couple of weeks when I came in and I explained to her that, hey, I know my resume said this about, intelligence, but I'm also looking about administration and want to learn a little more. She quickly was like, hey, we have interviews. Do you want to sit in on them? And just the fact that she was willing to right there dive in and tell me, hey, this is a place where you can not only see what we're expecting from other people and what we're searching for in other people, but also how other people in the federal government within our agencies are interviewing for the other positions. And those interviews, I was able to sit in on probably 3 or 5, and it was really cool to see the backgrounds that people have, because again, as an intern, I want to get the experience that some of these people, that some of these candidates had on their resume. So not only looking at the resume, but hearing their, you get asked 9 questions in an interview. So hearing their highlights or hearing, their weaknesses or strengths, their experiences, I'm like, okay, I want to get into that, okay, take a mental note. Can I get into this program? That was really impactful. Just to not only hands-on, but to see what my agency is expecting.
That's great. And in fact, Lori Brown, who's your preceptor, I understand you're going to continue working with her, but she has a question. And I do want to let everybody know and remind them that you can ask the question yourselves. I don't have to ask them for you unless you're camera shy. But Lori asks, what, with all the parts that you were able to participate in, which area interested you the most?
Which area interested me the most? Surprisingly enough, I would say the budgeting process, if that's the answer she's looking for, or like in that aspect of the responsibilities that I sat in. There were a few projects I was a part, but I think budgeting was probably the best one. Again, I don't have a strong background in finance and budgeting. I took a few besides a few classes, and again, my own, there wasn't much, but listening and learning. Oh, I can talk to you directly, Lord. Listening to how you were explaining the process to me, showing me the forms you have to fill out, telling me like about the fiscal year and all, learning about the fiscal year, and what's required from us as an agency, and how we are required to properly spend that money. I really enjoyed it.
So it gave you that opportunity to put what you've learned in the classroom
In
and
the classroom,
apply it.
yes.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, we have had some great questions, and I know that you've had a great experience with the United States Fish and Wildlife Services, but we want to get moving on. And I know you're still working today, in fact. So thank you so much, John,
Yes.
for this great presentation. And we can't wait to see what else you're going to do. Okay.
Thank you. And I just want to give again a quick shout out to Lori. Thank you for allowing me not only to work under you this summer, but allowing me to do this as I work today. So thank you for all the guidance and mentorship.
All right. Thank you
for
so much.
Selecting us. And we appreciate it. You've been a phenomenal employee, and I look forward to what we're going to do for the remainder of your year. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Well
Whitney.
done, John. Thank you. All right. And next up, we have Michael Shavira, who worked with the Raza Development Fund. So we're going to have Michael take it away.
Hello, everyone. It is nice to see everybody that's here, even though we're kind of all virtual. So I worked for the Raza Development Fund this summer. It was kind of really unique in that, one, it's the largest Latino-oriented CDFI in the country, going out of several different states that they're helping. As you can see on the slide here, they have $400 million in total assets and have raised over $3 billion in private capital leverage. But I don't want to kind of focus on this slide as much. You guys can kind of read it, but I kind of want to get the main takeaway I got of working for RDF. It was really unique in that this is one of the first organizations that I worked with that is intrinsically partnered with the community. They have a specific model that I kind of enjoyed learning throughout the summer, in that they have, sorry, if I look over here, my dog's going crazy, but they have a model in which they go into each state that they're working with, and instead of kind of imposing what they feel might be the best for the community, they actually have this ambassador model, which I kind of noted in some of the work that I was doing throughout the semester, throughout the summer. And this ambassador model was unique to me because they set up their stuff in the state, and then they found people who were of high influence within the underserved communities. They brought them in, and basically they worked with these ambassadors to partner with the community to kind of better understand exactly what the community want invested in, what the community want built, and what the community wanted as a whole to help, bring them out of what RDF would kind of describe as the poverty in that area. A lot of the other CDFIs that I was researching throughout my time in RDF, I had kind of noticed that they were mostly coming in almost at kind of a predatory level, and specifically with loans and loan rates, which I found incredibly interesting considering the whole point of a CDFI. And it was making it incredibly difficult for a lot of these businesses to actually get out of their struggles, especially with COVID. So I found that model really interesting. And then to kind of pivot into what I was focusing on mainly in my internship was to develop an evaluation model in regard to what they had as a Hope Fund. And this Hope Fund was specifically designed for COVID. And they were kind of getting the monetary loans from the government and distributing it to the community. But they wanted to try to figure out, not only with this Hope Fund, but then use this evaluation model in the long run, is to see how effective and efficient their loans were in keeping these businesses afloat. And that's kind of where I found probably one of the most difficult things throughout the summer was how do you define if your loan is being effective. And so we had to go through a list of criteria to kind of understand, all right, how many employees did they have prior to COVID? With the loan we gave them, how many were they able to retain? Were they able to hire any back? And that's kind of how we were going through that model. And it was a really enjoyable internship throughout the summer. I was offered to stay on this semester. I was thinking about it, but fortunately, I was actually offered a position in the Defense Intelligence Agency, which I will hopefully be taking up in January of 2021. So thank you. That's my spiel.
All right, and now we would love to welcome some questions from our attendees. Of course, if you'd like to be on camera, we certainly encourage that interaction with our students. And again, you can type the word question in the chat if you'd like to appear on camera, or just type a question mark. We'd certainly love to hear from you. I'd like to ask Michael, what was something that surprised you about the experience?
What surprised me was how much they trusted a 23-year-old to kind of do their own thing remotely. Because I was completely remote throughout the semester. And not only that, but they gave me the work. They kind of gave me a very, very brief idea of what they wanted to do. And then they were like, you got a week to do it. I never heard from anybody again. And I kind of had to produce it in a week's time. And I did. And it was kind of a learning experience because not only was I not having anybody watch over me like I had previous internships, but I know this kind of work ethic is going to translate to when I'm actually in person, when I'm in DC come January, and no one's going to be watching over me like, you know, they normally do in internships, and I'm going to have to get stuff done on a timely manner.
A lot of time management type of skills. It looks like our director, Lillard Richardson, would like to ask a question.
So Michael, I'd like to hear a little more about the evaluation part of that. And so you mentioned the issue about jobs and some of the impacts on the organization. Was there any analysis of how it affected the local community, and particularly the community that's relevant to, you know, to their organization? How did they assess that, or did they try to bring that into the evaluation, or how did that work?
Yeah, for that evaluation, the only thing that we're looking at or trying to look at was how effective the loan was in keeping the business afloat, specifically just because the loans were coming from the government for COVID and COVID only, and that's all they were doing at that time. So that's kind of all we looked at, was kind of the retention of the employment afterwards, and as well as looking at what they had before. And then also they had to report, I believe, their revenue that was coming in prior to COVID, as well as, all right, we gave you the loan. This is the amount of employees you have now. What's the revenue now coming in? Is this actually, you know, helping you?
Okay, so it's mostly just on the organization, but not on that broader community.
On the organization at this point. Yeah.
Okay.
Great. And it doesn't look like we have any additional questions, but Michael, thank you so much for your.
Joha has a question.
Joha has a question. Okay, Joha.
Hi, I was typing it, but I can just say it out loud. So what do you think was the most useful tool you acquired from your coursework to be able to do the evaluation? And what tool do you think you would love to have acquired that you didn't through your coursework?
I think the best tool I had, I kind of thought this over to myself when I was doing the internship, was actually our evaluation class that we took. Actually came in handy. And specifically in that was the ability to think critically and ask questions in such a way where it's not going to actually skew the results in your favor. Because when I was looking at the original evaluation they had come up with, I kind of noticed questions here or there that could seem a little leading and kind of give the response that RDF was looking for. And I felt that would skew everything a little bit. In regards to the tools I kind of wish I could have had going into this, probably wanting to have a little bit better of understanding of the financing and different financial regulations behind organizations that fall under CDFIs or kind of just financial regulations in general and how that is governed. Because at the beginning, I had to kind of learn all that stuff on my own, which wasn't a big deal. I like learning. So I guess some type of more financial regulation understanding would have been incredibly helpful going into this.
And let's see if anyone else has a question. Just let me know either in the chat window or by waving your hands. But I don't currently see anyone. Oh, Chris Whitco has a question.
Hey, Michael, good job. That sounds great. How did your study turn out? So like how effective are these programs that you analyzed, or can you tell us that?
The majority of them were staying afloat, but given that the ones I was looking at specifically were in South Phoenix, so initially they were doing well. But then, as I'm sure everybody knows, Arizona got hit incredibly hard with COVID, and we got a complete shutdown for pretty much all of July, which is where I was working, when I was working, doing kind of the main research. And a lot of the businesses started having a layoff and were kind of reversing and going back to what they were. So I think a lot of the results kind of got skewed because of that. But in totality, I don't actually know what the final results were because I left and took up a different position elsewhere towards the end. But that being said, everything was kind of looking like it was getting reversed back to I guess, lockdown state.
Great. Well, we want to keep the presentations moving along. And up next, we have Caroline Reigel with the Institute for Public Policy and Economic Development. So Caroline, take it away.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. I keep getting a notification on my computer saying I have like an unreliable internet source. So like, can you guys see and hear me okay?
We can, but let me know, Caroline, if something happens and we happen to lose you, what we'll do, and I want to let everyone else know this, we will have you rejoin us and we'll just push you maybe down a little bit later in the program. How does that sound?
Yeah, hopefully I think I should be okay, but I just want to make sure. Okay, so someone let me know. You guys.
So we'll get you started and hope for the best. Okay?
Great. Yep. So actually, my internship this summer was at the Institute for Public Policy and Economic Development in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. Just so you do, it's an economic research and applied research and consulting group. It was formed in 2004 with the purpose of assisting in the revitalization of Wilkes-Barre through capital allocated from local businesses, industry, higher education institutes, and nonprofit organizations. It consists of a partnership of 13 colleges and universities, and Penn State is actually one of them. And the Institute's managing partner is Wilkes University. And nowadays it operates as a research-based think tank and consultancy organization. It's a lot, but basically my responsibilities this summer at the internship were pretty diverse. They had me do a lot of different things, which I really appreciated because like coming into this whole program, my whole like idea has been like, I'm still figuring out what I want to do. Like I have a sociology background, so I know I like social policy, but like I still wasn't really sure what I wanted. So I like that they gave me a lot of different projects to do. Basically, so the first thing they gave me to do was a longitudinal study.
It sounds like we might be losing Caroline. Okay, so I think we're losing Caroline. So what we're gonna do is, Nick, are you with us right now and ready to go?
Yep, I'm here.
Because I think Caroline, are you back?
I'm here.
Okay, do you want to continue or do you want to log back off and come back in?
I mean, I can like see. That's
okay.
I said I still see everything okay. So this is
okay. Why don't you pick that back up? We missed about the last last couple sentences of what you were talking about. Okay, so let's try that again and have Nick on standby. How about that?
Are you sure?
Yeah. Maybe you better log. Yeah, let's have you log back off and come back in and make sure everything's connected. Okay. Yeah, because you're freezing up. All right, so let's go to Nick. So Nick McLean has been with the College of the Liberal Arts Office of Digital Pedagogy and Scholarship this summer. So Nick, let's hear what you've been up to.
Hey, my name's Nick, and I worked with Digital Pedagogy and Scholarship, or DPS, here at the College of Liberal Arts, and I was a data analyst there. So DPS is kind of an interesting place in the college because we work with residential faculty and residential online courses, which kind of makes it a little complicated jurisdictionally wise because there's world campus courses, residential online courses, and then there's like a third shop that does some departments. So it creates a complicated bureaucracy, which made my job interesting. But my biggest responsibilities going in pre-COVID expectations were to find new ways to quantify outcomes that we really relied on qualitative data in the forms of surveys or testimonials or whatnot to see how what we were doing to impact courses was having on outcomes for students and how faculty were using tools provided by the college to better engage students. So that was going to be my main job, was to find ways to use data we had and new data collection techniques to really come up with like new reports and build models that can hopefully put together profiles of students who are succeeding in course possibly, and see where they could improve at the course and department level mostly. Once COVID hit, that kind of threw a wrench in everything in the college, and our office was one of the main ones hit because we also do a lot with transitioning faculty, residential faculty, to online tools. So pretty much everybody became a part-time tech tutor in our office. So I did have to do a lot of that as well, which was a valuable experience as well, because I was able to get a more hands-on community. I was able to talk to faculty more in person, where before I was just looking at data pulls from our website, and it was just everybody was in a spreadsheet with tens of thousands of students and hundreds of faculty members, but be able to actually hear from them and like ask them like, why do students over the age of 25 do so much better in these courses as a whole? Why do females drop, fail, withdrawal at 5% lower rates over the last 10 years in the college? So these were, it was one thing to build the models, which ended up being not the easy part, but like what I thought was going to be the hardest part was like applying like the stat that we learned and like the analysis part in the courses. I thought building the models using those skills was going to be the hard part. But I think the hardest part is when I went to present my findings and people looked at me and said, like, why do you think this is the way it is? And I was like, I have no idea, zero clue. And that wasn't always an acceptable response. So it was very interesting. It was actually kind of fun to learn like how the results of like these models I built could be possibly explained with. That's where the qualitative part of what we were doing before kind of came back to it. I kind of saw going into it, I saw all these like 100-page reports of faculty and students complaining about faculty and faculty complaining about courses as useless. But I found a lot of use in it in the end when I circled back to once I did have data on it. And then now I had hundreds of pages of complaints that were really just possible explanations for why the outcomes were the way they were. And I think that combination of data, like gathering data, building models, and getting stakeholder input, and then circling back to suggestions back to the administrators of courses, departments, or even college administrators at points of what we could do differently or what possible explanations there are for the way things are, was very interesting. I think the other thing that I did not expect and had no experience with that I had to spend a lot of time learning and considering was ethical management of data. There's just so many considerations, and like I didn't understand like how much like discretion and like how careful I had to be with the access I had and the data I had, because it was very like it could be very potent or very it could be misrepresented if, you know, somebody got a hold of it. So it was like it was just very not something I'd expect, like how to you know, be like how to consider you know, asking for help, showing people those models or whatnot, but at the same time being very careful about what the possible ramifications of the models I was putting together would be if they were not presented in a proper way, or if they were just left out there. They could have been very, you know, damaging to people. So that was something I was absolutely not expecting going into this. And I think that was something I think I would have benefited from, you know, learning more about going into it. I would say like one of the coolest things was learning how like these fundamental skills we learn in courses were just that. They're like fundamental, but they only like are the base of it, and that it only works in a perfect world, and the world is not perfect. You know, there was times where, you know, my preceptor Kevin would say, you know, we need to survey, you know, faculty on access or whatnot to internet access when they're transitioning to online teaching, and we need it in 2 days. But you also need to contact Stratcom, AR&D, and Career Enrichment Network and get their input. And how do you deal with, you know, conflicting stakeholder input? And it was just like applying these concepts in the workplace was a lot different. And as I kind of mentioned before, kind of dealing with like the almost seeming convoluted bureaucracy of it at times, where if you step back and say, why is this the way it is? It doesn't always make sense, is difficult. But now that I work there for 300 hours, it makes a lot more sense why it is the way it is. But I'm sure I'll see that again in the future. So I think those were the main takeaways. It was a great place to work. You can see me in my office here in the picture. My basement. We did get one meeting in before everybody went around to the summer. So it was a nice place, and I'd recommend anybody that was looking for an internship in the future to contact DPS. They're good people over there.
So we're getting some questions for you, Nick, here. What did you learn about the university as an organization?
I actually had the opportunity to work with a few different levels. Like I said, I definitely did a lot of work in the college, and I definitely had the opportunity. I love to talk to the dean a lot. He was really nice and a good person, and he was new, so we kind of got to see like, you know, his transition. But, you know, me and one of the instructional designers in the office actually worked with instructional designers from SMEAL and actually instructional designers from other Big Ten universities. So it was really interesting to see how our office, one, doesn't exist in most places, and two, how, you know, we have a very decentralized system where these colleges are pretty much allowed to run themselves, where when we were working with other universities, a lot of times they didn't get the same like free reign that we had at times. So it was really interesting to me because I thought it was a lot more of a blueprint for a university. Like I thought it was a lot more like a centralized hierarchy. I never considered that there was, you know, everybody was running on their own terms in many ways, college-wise. You know, in there's some centralization, like, you know, I had to do onboarding out at, you know, Innovation Park, but then IT is not centralized. And so it was interesting to me, because like I said, I thought it was a lot more standard across universities.
Okay. We have another question here. What sources or criteria did you use to figure out those ethical issues that you mentioned about the data?
Well, at first, to get access to the Penn State data systems, I had to do a bunch of classes and stuff. And I don't know, everybody's done online classes and most of us just sleep through them. But when I was working with other people in the college, and it became abundantly obvious where it was like, yeah, this needs to like stay here for now, like until we know how to move forward with this. Like it was kind of like a environmental thing also, where because I also did work with the other data analysts and like the college data analysts and whatnot, and he was a mentor to me in many ways. And just the way you talk about things, because we always talk about like considerations of these models, not just of like, you know, anything we omitted or forgot to include or were ignorant to or couldn't measure, but also possible like interpretations are like, what if we just gave somebody, you know, a graph or a chart or a overview, what would they think of it? That's always something we considered. And, you know, what would the ramifications of that be? That's kind of where you pick up on a lot of these ethical considerations.
Great. Well, that was such a great presentation, Nick, and I know you've enjoyed working with DPS, and we want to thank you. And of course, we're so excited to keep our presentations moving along. We'll get back to Caroline because we're still making sure everything's settled with her connection. So up next, we are going to hear from Andrew Ritchie, who worked with Pennsylvania Population Network. So Drew, take it away.
Sounds good. All right, so this summer I had the pleasure of interning with the Pennsylvania Population Network. The PPN is a visible program of demographic and health research, application, and outreach, focusing on population characteristics and change in Pennsylvania, the United States, and the world. Throughout my time this summer with the PPN, I completed and accomplished several things. The biggest was the publication of 2 briefs on COVID-19 in Pennsylvania. The first brief looked at single-parent households and how they were affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. Some key findings from this brief were that single-parent families are more likely to have female rather than male heads of households. Families with single female heads of households experience much higher poverty rates than married couple families do. This poverty in single female householder families was highest in rural counties in Pennsylvania. And lastly, that female workers were disproportionately concentrated in industries which were impacted directly by COVID-19. With these findings, we recommended that increasing the availability of safe childcare, heightened employment security, and implementation of a living wage were needed in order for single parents to be able to consistently provide proper care for their children. With the second policy brief that we wrote, we focused on internet and broadband access to poor and rural counties within the state of Pennsylvania. Some key findings that we got from this brief were that children in rural counties were more likely to lack internet and device access, potentially placing them at a greater educational disadvantage. Those who made less money were more likely to lack internet and device access, which could be problematic for remote working during the pandemic. And lastly, due to health conditions and aging, rural residents may rely heavier on telemedicine, but were also more likely to encounter issues with internet and device access. These findings led us to recommend that we need to increase access to the internet, which would increase residents' ability to interface with government services, schools, and businesses. I argued that this has the potential to reduce disparities across geographic areas, rural communities, and low-income areas, and could increase Pennsylvania's competitiveness in the global economy as employment, schooling, and healthcare become even more disconnected from their physical location. Well, the 2 aforementioned briefs were the main focus of the internship this summer. There were many other tasks that I was fortunate enough to be able to complete. I was also responsible for the daily monitoring of COVID data in the state of Pennsylvania. I used the Pennsylvania Department of Health to tabulate and calculate those numbers. And from there, I used a mapping software called Tableau to display my findings on a county by county level, which would then go into the PPN, Twitter, and Facebook page. The last major thing that I did this summer was collaborate on a project with the Pennsylvania State Data Center. We met once a week, and I collected various data for their policy brief on elderly people in Pennsylvania. The data they had us looking at was much more complex than what we were doing for the 2 policy briefs. Required software such as R and Stata, so I was able to gain some more experience with R and learn a little bit about Stata. Unfortunately, the Pennsylvania State Data Center has not yet finished the brief, but I'm waiting to see how they used the data that we collected in the brief. Some key insights and takeaways from my time with the PPN were that I was able to learn new software and further develop my skills with other software. During my time in the School of Public Policy, I have had plenty of experience with Excel and R, and this internship allowed me to go further, or to further explore both of those softwares. I was also able to learn new software such as Tableau. Another aspect of the internship that I found useful was that it taught me how to write a policy brief for a non-academic audience, while the MPP program has taught me how to write policy memos. It's always with an academic audience in mind, and I learned that the two are very different, something that I hope will help me in my career later on. It also gave me an experience working in a professional setting, even though we were with the issue of COVID-19 and remote work, still able to work in a professional setting. Overall, it was a great summer and a wonderful experience working with a PPN. Like I said, although we were remote, I felt like the work that I was doing was important and it mattered, and I feel like it'll be beneficial later in my career. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Drew. So one thing, we have a couple of we have a comment and we have a great question here. First, one of our professors, Andrew Fenelon, said, "Nice job on the COVID graphics. I liked seeing those on Twitter." I know you also worked on a paper, and that was on Twitter as well. So great job with whatever you guys did, getting the word out on social media with this project. Also, we have a question here. How did you decide what types of data to use in the study? And was it a committee or a single supervisor that determined the contents of the studies?
It was really a group of 3 of us. It was a preceptor, and then we had 2 interns, counting me. And she kind of gave us free reign to look at whatever we wanted to do and research whatever we wanted to. And we picked topics, such as the 2 that we picked, and we kind of had to set the variables, what we wanted to look at, what we didn't, where we wanted to go with the paper. And from there, we used the census data collected by the government. That was primarily our primary data source, and we found variables that we thought were beneficial to the paper.
Great. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat, so I just want to make sure no one else is waving their hands for the opportunity to ask any questions before we go on to our next presentation. But it sounds like you had a great summer working with PPN. So we are going to go on and hear from Alana King, who worked with the Viral Imaginations COVID-19 project. And her preceptor, Michelle Meckel, who works with the bioethics department, wanted to say what a great job that Alana did this summer. So she's really excited about everything that she did with Viral Imaginations. She's a natural team builder. So I wanted to point that out. So Alana, tell us about Viral Imaginations and the work you did with them this summer.
Hi, everyone. So I was the outreach and policy intern for the Viral Imaginations COVID-19 project, organized as an intersectional project involving study in the fields of health, humanities, arts, and bioethics. The project went live on April 27th, 2020. And it is a website that is designed with a dual purpose. First, as an online gallery of written and visual creative expression by Pennsylvanians of their COVID-19 pandemic experience, and second, as an archive for future study of public reaction to pandemics and individual pandemic narratives. Art allows people to explore and express their reactions, emotions, and experiences, which helps to facilitate a deeper understanding. Through Viral Imaginations, Pennsylvania's current and former residents have the opportunity to have their coronavirus experiences recorded and shared. When I started, my preceptor, Michelle Meckel, quickly informed me that my duties were essentially to be her right-hand man. I would be working very closely with her to get the website off the ground, train and aid new interns, publish submitted work to the website, and generate interest in the project via outreach efforts and social media posts. So 2 days a week, I was tasked with curation, outreach, and social media. On these days, I was to monitor the Viral Imagination submission inbox and review any artwork that was submitted. If it met our curation standards, then I was to post it to the website and make a subsequent social media post, which would generate interest in the work. On these days, I was also required to reach out to various entities in order to spread the word about the project. I emailed Pennsylvania historical societies, bar associations, legal associations that were delineated by race, gender, or some other characteristic. And I also acted as the point of contact for undergraduate interns, which we took on as well. I oversaw their outreach efforts, assigned them organizations and tasks, answered their questions, and performed a weekly check-in through the weekly team meeting. Many interns were very successful in their outreach and gained interview and marketing opportunities out of it, which were great opportunities for the project and led to multiple new submissions of both visual and written work to the gallery. Michelle also informed me that I would have archival duties. So these duties started with me interviewing Michelle and all other PIs in order to get their take of how the project started. After hearing their individual levels of interest and how they became aware of and got involved in the project, I compiled all of the information into one project narrative. Within this narrative, I also keep track of all meetings that occurred, kept detailed notes, again, for archival purposes. The narrative will be helpful to our other graduate intern, whose name is Lauren, as we continue to apply for grant funding opportunities in order to sustain the project through the pandemic. A key project policy that I had a hand in implementing was the issue of submission limitation. Recently, over the summer, we had an artist submit 25 pieces of visual artwork over a 24-hour period. So we began to question whether or not we needed to limit the number of submissions to avoid wearing out our interns with these massive intakes. Michelle and I took a poll to see what the overarching opinion of the other PIs and graduate intern was. Originally, we came up with kind of a blanket statement, baseline 5 submission limitation, but concerns were raised that this limitation would be detrimental to the project goal, as it wouldn't necessarily capture the evolution of people's experiences with the pandemic. If people had reached their 5 submission limitation in April, then we would miss out on capturing and documenting their experiences with changing laws and changing orders over the course of the pandemic. After the case was made, the policy was amended to a 5 submission limitation over a 60-day period. So this change allows us to continue to document the altering experiences while avoiding overwhelming our interns with numerous submissions. And we're currently exploring ways to keep track of this policy and ensure adherence to it. So we're working very closely with the IT department in order to ensure that that can be enforced. I'm very lucky that Michelle was willing to take me on and trust me with a variety of tasks that grew my skill set. She's a fantastic preceptor, and I'm excited to continue working with her for as long as she'll have me.
All right, thank you, Alana. We have a couple questions here. First, did you find a significant common experience between patients infected with COVID-19?
One thing that I really saw was, because we classify the artwork, we have them use 5 words that they think captures essentially the essence of the artwork, and we use them as tags, essentially hashtags. And I know from personal experience, a lot of the ones that I saw always used the hashtag of hope. It was always a very positive experience. There were definitely, stories of loneliness and missing family members and, terrified of what was going on. But there was always this overarching theme of hope that people knew if we could get through this, we'd be okay, kind of thing.
Great. And another one here is, did any of the art change the way that you personally have understood the pandemic, and why?
I think a lot of the art, kind of like the pictures that I put on my my slide, there were very different aspects of it. The angel, the nurse angel that's on the far left, that's kind of, it's a dark piece but really pays homage to service workers and everything like that. So I think seeing some of those darker images fostered a sense of connectedness in that we all realized it was a shared experience. We were all kind of going through the same thing and had the same underlying emotions about it.
Okay. And who do you see as the stakeholders of the project behind the principal investigators, the interns, and the artists?
I'm not entirely sure that I understand the question.
So who are the main people who are involved in the project or who are invested in this project moving forward?
I think the public in general is very invested in it. We've had a lot of great responses from them. Huck Institutes has been a really great help to our project in terms of providing people to help with, IT and the technical aspect of the project. So I think, the public, Huck Institutes, I know the university has used some of the artwork or is using some of the artwork that is on our website to make signs to encourage people on campus to wear masks. So I think the university as a whole is probably invested in it as well.
Do you think this is something that could go beyond that as far as, healing the community and helping the community, maybe those moving forward?
I think so, yeah. Obviously, as we get more and more submissions, as the word gets out there and people learn about us a little more, I do think this will be something that helps, the community of State College, but also Pennsylvania as a whole, because it's so representative of everybody's experience, regardless of where they are in Pennsylvania.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Alana. It sounds like a great project, and obviously Michelle had a wonderful experience working with you and really appreciated everything that you did and all of your expertise. So with that, we're going to move on to our next presenter, who is Kai Althaus, who worked with the Pennsylvania Commission on Sentencing. So welcome, Kai, and let us know about your experience.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon, and thanks, Whitney, for the introduction. As she said, my name is Kai Althaus, and over the summer, I interned remotely at the Pennsylvania Commission on Sentencing. Whitney, I'm not seeing the, there we go. Thank you.
Thank you for the reminder. Sorry about that, Kai.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so just a little bit about the commission itself to begin with. The Pennsylvania Commission on Sentencing is a legislative agency that creates the sentencing guidelines for Pennsylvania. So what this means is that for any given offense, they have used applied research to create a sentencing recommendation. And the way they do this is, if you can see the matrix next to the seal down there, it pits offense gravity score against prior record score. So the severity of a crime versus an offender's criminal history. And essentially, the greater each is, the harsher or the longer of the sentence the crime is. But again, this creates just a recommendation. This is then given to judges who must consider it, but they don't have to conform to it. They can give an aggravated sentence, a mitigated sentence, or they could even go outside of those ranges as long as they provide reasoning. The goals and the values of these sentencing guidelines, they're really important because they can create a common starting point. So it helps to eliminate wide-scale discrepancies for similar offenders for similar crimes. And in doing so, it also allows for consistency, fairness, and proportionality, because it will allow a judge to have discretion to use these aggravated and mitigated ranges in their sentencing. And within the structure of the commission, it's mostly broken down into 3 sections: data and research, IT, and education and outreach. During my time, I was mostly housed in data and research. So on to my roles and responsibilities. Because it was only a brief 10-week internship, my amazing and incredibly intelligent preceptor, Matthew Kleinman, who's also the deputy director of the commission, thought it best for me to get involved in as many projects as possible instead of seeing one all the way through to the end, which I probably would not have completed. So I got experience in data collection, quality analysis, some research projects, and I got to attend several webinars and meetings that were important. I'm just going to touch on one bit of each section, one project for each section to save on time here. So one of my favorite, the most interesting data project for me was data collection on missing information on misdemeanors in Philadelphia County. So I would look at their offense tracking numbers to go to these certain cases and to pull out a few information that was missing. Mainly the judge that tried the case, whether or not a felony was also brought against the offender but dropped, if there was a negotiated plea, a guilty plea, or if there was a jury trial, and what the punishment was at the end. This was a really interesting project because as I went through each case, it became really apparent how many people use guilty pleas and end up getting probation. And it's a vast majority of the time. So moving on to a research project that was really interesting. Working with my preceptor, Matthew Kleinman, we had a research question about judicial performance evaluations and procedural fairness. So basically, this is the idea of how do you determine if a judge is doing their job properly? And it turns out it's really difficult. The main tool is something called a retention survey, which the state basically uses to try and tell the electorate whether or not to vote a judge in. And it's really highly subjective. It's based on surveys given to lawyers, offenders, and court staff. And essentially made it really difficult to try and use a objective measure to try and prove if a judge is doing what they need to be doing. And I'll touch a little bit more on that later in my key insights. And lastly, I got to attend a lot of really cool and interesting webinars and meetings. My very first day, I attended the quarterly commission meeting, which is held by all of the state representatives, judges, professors who actually sit on the commission and dictate the policy and where they want the legislation and enhancements for the guidelines to go. So I got to see that leadership, those discussions right off the bat, a little overwhelming, but you know, it was a really, really good experience and set me up for the rest of the internship. And then also I got to just see a lot of webinars from national organizations talking about the use of criminal justice data and how useful and important it is. So to go through some of my insights, the first one is the importance of sentencing commissions in the criminal justice system. I can't state how important it is for the common starting point that these guidelines provide to judges. It really helps with fairness and equity and allowing for judges still to use discretion, but limiting large-scale discrepancies in sentencing for similar crime. The powerful impact of data on policy. Evidence-based practices and using data is unequivocally our best tool for informing policy decisions. And that became obvious to me. But on the other side, it can be a really big issue because data has this element of truth to it. People can use data in nefarious ways. They can intentionally misrepresent data in their findings. They can, somebody could simply misinterpret a finding leading to a policy that would create unintended consequences. So I found that to be really important. And then continuing on with that, as Dilbert has so eloquently described in that little comic strip, criminal justice data is really complex, and it takes a lot of time and energy to get good criminal justice data. One of the webinars I attended, a panelist spent his entire portion basically complaining about how long it takes for the Bureau of Justice Statistics to get his data to him. And then it's always spotty when it does. And that's the case for not only criminal justice data, but a lot of data. And that's something I will have to keep in mind as I move forward in my career. Ambiguity with judicial performance evaluations and determining fairness. Again, back to my our project on judicial performance evaluations. The subjective nature of the retention surveys is it's really difficult to fully determine whether or not a judge is, you know, objectively doing what they need to do. I mean, sometimes you could say if their cases are getting overturned a lot, that's a more concrete way of determining it. But it's really up to those retention surveys. I also got a lot of great discussions with key stakeholders and understanding how to talk to people who have authority and really know what they're saying when it comes to criminal justice policy. And then lastly, this was my first experience with applied research and seeing its direct link to policy outcomes. And for anyone first being immersed into the field that they're looking to explore in their career, that's an invaluable experience. And I would have to say that was the case for me as well. And I'd like to thank Matthew Kleiman, my preceptor, and Eric Milzich, the head of data and research, for taking me in and helping me to have these great experiences and to take these insights away with me. And that's a brief little overview of my internship. And yeah, let's move on to questions.
Well, yes, and Kai, we do have a few questions for you. How do you balance probation time with probation effectiveness?
So, just a second. Can you mute yours? Yeah. So how does one balance probation time with probation effectiveness?
Yes.
And essentially it's going to come down to a risk and needs evaluation that is going to determine specifically what types of probation and how long of probation will be effective. One research project we actually did, one research question we explored was to try and determine what is the sweet spot of probation, more or less. And that's going to vary depending on, you know, the nature of the crime. Was it violent? Was it not? And basically what we found was there's this 3 to 5 year time period that's ideal for most serious crimes, and anything from there on after, basically you see a negative correlation in success rate of probation. So a lot goes into it, but I would say it really depends, and you have to look at each individual offender.
Okay. If you potentially wanted to evaluate sentencing rather than just recommend, what data would you ideally want to collect? And that comes from Professor Andy Fenelon.
So, data would you rather than just recommend? I guess you would look at data on resentencing events. So say somebody gets out on probation and eventually commits another crime or has a technical violation that then results in them being resentenced or being reincarcerated. I would say the rates at which that is occurring would be a good evaluation to see if sentencing policy is working for specific recommendations or specific crimes.
Okay. And here's another one. How did federalism shape what the commission can do? Are there federal incentives or mandates? And how do they work with local governments to improve the data?
So I'm not entirely certain how federalism specifically, but in the Pennsylvania Commission's, Sentencing Commission's case, it is a state legislative agency. So it operates on the will of the General Assembly. So basically, whatever the state mandates for the commission to do, that's eventually how they do it. I don't believe it has like, there may be overarching laws at the US Sentencing Commission that the Pennsylvania Commission has to follow as well, but I'm not aware of what those may be at this time. But it is a state legislative entity. With that, in Pennsylvania, criminal sentencing is dealt with on a county by county basis. So they're all different entities operating under the same sentencing guidelines. So the way you kind of improve the work that they're doing with their localities is within the Education and Outreach Department of the Sentencing Commission. They go and do seminars with each and every county to make sure that they're operating their sentencing guidelines efficiently, properly, following the rules. A 10-year risk assessment tool was just implemented in July, and I actually got to join some Zoom seminars with the head of Education and Outreach to see them educate each and every stakeholder within the state.
Wow, that's great. Well, it sounds like you had a fabulous experience working with the PA Commission on sentencing, and I'm sure that I know you had a great time with your preceptors as well. So we want to thank you for this presentation, and we look forward to seeing what you're going to do next.
Absolutely. One more shout out to Matthew Kleiman and Eric and the executive director of the commission, Mark Bergman, for taking me in and making this work during a pandemic. It was a wonderful experience. Thank you.
And that's a great point. Once again, we do want to thank all these preceptors who just were able to pivot so quickly and give you guys great experiences. So we're going to go back to Caroline Rigel now, and hopefully she has been able to join us, possibly not by video. So let's hear, do we have Caroline with us? Caroline, are you on the line right now? She's been having internet problems, so I don't know that we...
Apparently it shut down on her again.
It shut down on her again? Okay. Yeah. So we're going to keep plugging along, and hopefully we'll get her in before the end of the event. It looks like she keeps coming in and out of the event. So up next, we are going to go to Adrian Corbin, who was interning with the College of the Liberal Arts Office of Digital Pedagogy and Scholarship. Adrian, tell us about your experience.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Adrian Corbin. I'm a second year MPP student. So over this past summer, I was able to intern with the Office of Digital Pedagogy and Scholarship. As you heard earlier, when Nick presented, our main job is to support faculty members when using online digital teaching methods. We provide workshops for faculty, training, and other professional development opportunities for our faculty. So early in the summer with the MPP, I don't know if you guys remember, we had that little professional development or that training when we was introducing that template to you, and I'll talk about that further later on. We do also special projects. We collaborate with faculty to pilot new digital tools and research experimental courses and formats. So pretty much what we do is we look at the numbers, see how courses are going, and like we go in there and we find a new innovative way to bring about new learning methods for the students and different teaching styles for professors that is more up to date. And with that, we design it, we implement, we evaluate, we stay through the entire process. So we are there from beginning to finish. So if you ever need any questions, anything, the faculty can always reach out to us and we'll be there to assist you. We also partner with offices inside the College of Liberal Arts and also outside and across the university, share resources and develop more innovative and learning experiences. So over the summer, I was fortunate enough to work on these 3 great projects that I truly had an amazing time working on. So the first project was with AARP, and I worked on this with through the Office of DPS with the Center for Black Digital Research here at Penn State. So what we did, this was a 2-part workshop. It was an interactive workshop where they shared the importance of archiving and preserving the stories, because due to the pandemic that occurred, there's throughout history, we do not have a lot of information on African American history and stuff in the museum and Anacostia Museum. So what we did, we went into the ARP members, we did a webinar with them, and we shared with them the importance of preserving. So like when research is done later on, 10 to 20 years from now, you could go in and grab that data and it's available.
Yeah, you guys were.
There's a lack of information there. So we went in there, we were able to sorry, that just caught me off guard. But we were able to get in there and be able to show them how important it is to preserve and have that information readily available. And then my second project that I worked on was with the School of Public Policy. So with everybody here, and this was truly like an amazing experience for me, just being able to work with our faculty and everything. So what we did is, I know that we have professors here, we have students. So the Canvas course templates that you guys have, that you guys are using, that you guys are taking in class and filling out your assignments, that was something that us DPS, Dave and I, the instructional designer, we were able to work on and gear that towards the School of Public Policy. So down to the images, the modules, how they're laid out, the little, the student lounge that you guys have. There's pictures of us students there. Whitney was also able to help us with the imaging, and it was truly beautiful because it was like students came back giving me feedback saying that they loved it. I'm also an RA here in White course, and I have a student resident named Artemio, and he's taking the statistics course. And when he saw that, he was like, wow, I can see that Penn State put their resources to something. Seeing that like the Canvas layout, I was like, wow, this is something I've never seen, because we all take other Penn State courses and it's like, well, previously you've taken it and you see like it's all over the place. But seeing that this layout and how it's now very structured and organized, it's definitely very appreciative. The third project that I worked on was also, this is kind of more confidential, but it's something that really I'm truly passionate about and I'm currently still working on. So pretty much with the College of Liberal Arts, Nick and I, the data analysts, so we got together, sent a bunch of data to search through all the courses through the College of Liberal Arts. And it was a small project at first where we wanted to take on a course. We saw it where there's a high drop fail withdrawal. And we wanted to see which course would be best to take on and for DPS to take on and try to improve. So through that, we saw like there was like high disparities in drop fail withdrawal within minority students. And without pointing at anybody, but it was a high alarming rate. So we took this to our director, we shared it with him, and we said like, look, we know that this was a smaller project, but we took it to him, showed it to him like there was an issue that we need to address at a larger stake. So we were able to set up a meeting with Dean Lang, and we had that meeting, talked to him, presented our data and our finding, and it was truly like, it was amazing because it was like we were taking a step forward, like addressing these issues, and not like, it was something that we were timid about because like, we don't want to like call out professors or anything, but it was like something that through the data and the research we found like it was something that needed to be addressed. And we were able to do so. And that is a project that we are continuously working on throughout the year. And I'm just trying to help and make a change with that. And it's just something truly I've been passionate about. And that is, I have also been fortunate enough to continue working on my internship with Office of DPS throughout the rest of the school year. So it went from a summer internship where I actually joined in late, like middle of June, which I now was able to offer the opportunity to work throughout the entire school year. And then another takeaway from that is I also started applying to jobs early, and through my experience with DPS, I was able to get offered a job opportunity at Amazon. So using my experience from DPS, so that was it was truly lovely working with DPS and using that experience to then transfer it from my interview with Amazon and just being able to get that offer. Got that offer 2 days ago. So it was truly a great internship experience. And I truly love it. And I look forward to working with DPS for the rest of the school year. Like I tell them, I said, I love this position. Like, But that is it, and I'm opening the floor to any questions.
And we do have a few questions here for you, and a lot of congrats from different people on your securing a position at Amazon. Let's see, Lillard is asking, beyond the technical aspects, what did you learn about design in a broad sense?
Okay, what I learned from design. So pretty much the MPP template, just going through it and like HTML editor, going like, it's truly like, I have no IT background. So it was like I had to take on this new challenge, and DPS was able to guide me through it. Like working with Dave, when we were doing the MPP template, it was hard at first, but then I was able to grasp it. And if you love the template, give me the comments. If you don't like it, talk to Kevin. But yes, it was truly nice. Any other questions?
Yes, you do have a couple here. So your preceptor, Jennifer, is asking, these three projects seem to be very different from each other. How did you balance working on them in a short period of time? Was it challenging to work with such different stakeholders?
So balancing it is, so I have like, it was truly, I was working on all three of these projects at the same time. That was the order. So ARP was the first one, then the MPP template came on like a week later, and then the drop fail withdrawal project, which is currently still going on. I was able to balance it because I have to schedule, calendar, prepare my notes before I go into meetings, just being able to like, just wear different hats and be able to maneuver around and like use what I learned from one project into the other one. So pretty much the ARP, having that awareness for African American history and like trying to preserve those stories and bringing it to the drop fail withdrawal throughout the College of Liberal Arts, trying to address those issues, like try to find that balance, because if we go to PWI, why are we experiencing minority students failing at a higher rate than white students? So it was like addressing those issues, like, yeah, just having that balance of wearing multiple hats and trying to keep a strict schedule.
And yeah, we have a comment, I guess. This will be from Kevin Conaway, also from DPS. He had something to say. Kevin?
Yeah, I just wanted to add great work and congrats, Adrian. And certainly Adrian has brought together a proposal to take the MPP Canvas module that many of the professors and students have seen, to actually take it to other departments and programs throughout the college. So we're really excited about that. That'll be some of the work he's continuing to do, as well as his work on drop fail withdrawal rates within the college. Thank you.
And just to share, to keep going on that, believe it or not, like I took undergrad courses here at Penn State. So then when you look at Canvas compared to like how the MPP template is, a lot of professors don't have that available to them, like to have that layout to like go in and like make the course where you could go, your assignments and your assignments and not in file folders and not in this module. So if we were able to like go across the College of Liberal Arts and make it geared toward each department in a sense, that would be amazing. Because right now we're in this pandemic where everything is virtual. If we could take that extra step to do that, yeah, propose that and see how that goes.
Excellent. Well, another wonderful experience, it sounds like, for you this summer, and look what you got out of it, securing a job at Amazon. Thank you so much for your presentation, Adrian. And we want to keep things going. So up next, we are going to hear from Dennis McCartan, who worked with the Republican Party of Pennsylvania. So Dennis, tell us about your experience this summer.
Hello, everybody. Thank you guys for joining us and giving all us here in the public policy program this experience. As Whitney said, my name is Dennis McCartan. I worked in the Congressional Liaison Office for the Republican National Committee. I don't know if we have any prospective students with us, but if there are, and if you guys are interested in working in politics or campaigns or even consulting, you might find this particularly interesting, as the things we're going to discuss here are used universally in any statewide campaign for either party. The way we ended up with this style of organization is based on an accumulation of best practices that have sort of been discovered over the years, combined with an increasing integration of technology. And this sort of helps campaigns identify voters, listen to constituents, and hopefully get them motivated to come to the polls on behalf of your campaign. So Pennsylvania is a battleground state. So we're going to cover the ins and outs of how to approach purple states that have a tendency of leaning really either direction. Remember, in 2016, the Trump campaign won Pennsylvania by only 0.72%, which is actually the second closest presidential election for Pennsylvania, the first being when William Henry Harrison carried the state against Martin Van Buren in the election of 1840 by just 0.12%. So I guess there's your random history fact for the day. So jumping into things here, we have sort of the basic outline of what a state campaign looks like. You'll always have a state director who I sort of describe as like the general overseeing the operations and sort of being like the final say on important decisions. That is unless the state director, in this case, she's a very smart woman named Brittany Robinson, is directed otherwise by her bosses who have more of like a national role. And so therefore, I didn't depict them on the state's organizational pyramid. Brittany will work closely with President Trump's personal team as well as the other 49 state directors and the leadership and representatives of the RNC. Now, before we move any further, we need to make an important distinction real quick. The Trump 2020 presidential campaign and the RNC are not really the same thing. You can sort of think of them as two separate groups, being independent but also sharing similar interests. The Trump campaign is more or less interested in electing one person, where the RNC is sort of interested in 435 House races and 1/3 of the Senate. So they have a little bit different priorities, but they are sharing the same interest, and making sure that both of these groups are on sort of the same page is really important, so that one group's messaging isn't sort of overriding and overshadowing or conflicting with another group's message. So as for the rest of the pyramid, underneath the state director, we have the regional advisory board. So together with Brittany acting as its president, this board serves as sort of like the official decision-making body of the Pennsylvania campaign. There are 4 members of this board, and each of them are responsible for a quarter of the state with sort of like a geographical interest. And these individuals will effectively serve as advisors to Brittany. Beneath the regional advisory board are regional field directors, or RFDs for short. RFDs are one of the most crucial subunits of any campaign. And they are, in my experience, I would say they're probably the highest up on the ladder that someone outside the campaign has like a reasonable chance of meeting with. So there's 12 regions in Pennsylvania based on population. The individuals in charge of these different regions are sort of overseeing the grassroots activism and sort of like recruiting people to come be bodies that you can either help man polls or do things like going out and registering new voters. The smallest unit of organization is referred to as a turf. Turfs are like this weird thing. They sort of are always changing and moving. Turfs are usually created at the discretion of the RFD with a few rules and guidelines as to what can actually constitute as an official turf. There's usually some delegate combination of either demographics or population that goes into it. I've seen turfs that look huge and they're like almost half a county, and then there's other turfs that are like maybe a handful of neighborhoods put together. So there's something that really sort of doesn't have a constant form. But they're super important. And so in 2016, the Republican National Committee created a special program for turfs called the Republican Leadership Initiative, which is still running today. So each turf will have like a turf captain, and these people need to be somewhat competent or brought into the loop, even though they're not officially employed by the campaign or the RNC. They're sort of just like, community members that we want to make sure they really know what's going on and that they're getting other people involved and they're not giving them bad information. We need some organization cohesion there. So I guess moving back to the RNC attachments, I have them listed on the pyramid there. I only put 2 down, but in reality, there's a bunch of different offices that are all different sizes. Some are responsible for like financial stuff. Others are people who help with collecting and distributing data. As I said, my office was the Congressional Liaison Office, so our role was to go to different areas of the state and sort of serve as the communication arm between individual congressional races and the RNC and the Trump campaign. Other duties included sort of like a technical assistance. So this really shouldn't have fallen under us, but because we were in charge of being on the road, we go to a lot of different Republican committees for different counties and stuff. And that's sort of like a natural meeting place for a lot of volunteers. And so since we were already on the road, we had a technical sort of like assistance guy by the name of John Coons, and he would do a lot of things, giving people a rundown on how to use the apps, things of that nature. Yeah, of course, people had lots of questions, so we were there to sort of answer questions like that, and like most importantly, as I said, really make sure that whatever we all know Trump, he sort of says a lot of things, making sure that he wasn't saying something that maybe was conflicting with the policy position of a race that we have an interest in. So the RNC has like a literal $1 billion data collection database. The RNC also develops a lot of apps that volunteers can download onto their phones. And so knowing how to use sort of like the database, how it connects to the apps and all that stuff, as I said, is sort of like a really important thing. And it really does give you, I think, an advantage when you're in the middle of like a presidential election. When the shutdown sort of happened and travel got restricted, this sort of really hurt our office. I personally didn't really travel too much. I just went to my own county seat and worked with people there. But doing this all online, you have a lot of volunteers who, some of them are like older people who maybe aren't too familiar with how Zoom works. So now we're not only teaching them how to use one set of technology, but we're also trying to make sure everyone's familiar with how we can stay, communicating safely. That was a big challenge, but thankfully it actually went pretty flawlessly, I would say. Thankfully, John Coons was able to keep everybody looking good. So the final thing I'll say about my office in particular was voter identification. This is actually like sort of one of the areas where we were able to assist not only regional field directors, but also the regional advisory board. So basically what happens is you have the data team and they will build sort of like a profile of a likely voter. And the first real thing I started working on, the project that they gave me, was taking this profile that the data team built of people in like the middle of the state who frequent farmers markets in early summer, have like a high probability of registering and voting Republican. So making sure, like when it comes to resource allocation, making sure we're getting bodies where people are and where we can make contact with the public and make sure they're registered and ready to vote. That's really important. And so when it comes to making decisions about allocating sort of those resources, the data team building these profiles really gives people a better understanding of where volunteers are probably going to be most effective. And so the next thing that I want to talk to you guys about are coalitions. But before I do, real quick, the picture on the left shows Pennsylvania broken down to 12 regions that we just talked about. So as you can see, the less populated areas are much bigger regions. So by looking at this map, you can kind of sort of get a good sense where everyone's living in the state. But moving on to coalitions. Coalitions are basically groups of interested parties with a certain field of policy. These coalitions are organized by the RNC, and the coalition heads are RNC staff members who work alongside these parties to try and find ways of gaining their support. While there are a few national coalitions based on the campaign's national strategy, coalitions are mostly based on your state's characteristics. So in Pennsylvania, for example, energy, agriculture, manufacturing, and seniors are giant coalitions who I had the pleasure of being in meetings with and sitting down and talking to. Energy and agriculture are almost national coalitions because their combined scale relative to the US economy, but they're technically regional. Seniors are specific to PA because of our aging population. You can imagine a state like Florida also would have like a senior coalition, I would imagine. Manufacturing is a weird one. It's a national coalition, but the coalition, from my understanding when working with the RNC, was actually kind of small. But I think that's something that they're going to continue to build as the campaign sort of ramps up. And I know they really tried to get that up and running in Pennsylvania, being the Rust Belt state and everything. So we didn't have that issue in Pennsylvania. So I guess, oh yeah, so before I forget, there are also emerging coalitions in Pennsylvania, one of which is like medical technology, which was pretty important. So they'll be working to organize with medical tech people and people in the medical field as well. If you can look at the bottom there, I have Catholics listed as a coalition, which was pretty interesting. This actually came up in the middle of my internship. We're sitting down, we're talking about all the different coalitions that Trump's campaign is interested in, and they bring up Catholics. And if you're thinking to yourself, like, well, is sort of different than all the other ones, you're right. But as you might be aware of, Joe Biden is a Catholic, and for whatever reason, this scares the Trump campaign enough to sort of sit down and want to target Catholic voters as a potential way of shoring up sort of like their Christian base and potentially sapping away Biden voters. So that's an area that's going to be looked at, which is pretty interesting. This is probably going to be the first time the Catholic vote is even considered since Kennedy ran in 1960. So I thought that was just sort of a fun thing I'll throw at you guys. But that's basically all I have to say for our internship. So if there's any questions, feel free to fire away.
And we do have a few questions here. Dennis, how do the separate organizations, RNC, Trump campaign, congressional campaigns, work out differences in strategy?
So really there is no differences. It's more or less making sure that everyone has the resources that they need and that you're sort of vetting people who are going to be speaking on behalf of these campaigns, making sure that, I don't know, if Trump puts out something about coal or natural gas, like there's sort of like a conflicting issue there, right? Because these are competing sources of energy. Not that Pennsylvania really has like a coal industry, but just use it as an example. You could have potentially a congressman saying that they want to shore up coal and make sure coal isn't going anywhere, where Trump's more or less just giving all the attention to natural gas. And so that could be a conflict. So it's more or less directing the president's message to different areas of the state, but also making sure, because at the end of the day, these people are all sort of going towards the same goal, the same direction. And so it's more or less making sure that you're giving equal attention to all areas of interest and making sure you're not overshadowing or over promoting one group of people and shadowing another group of people. But yeah, so like how they would do that officially and communicate that would be through my office.
We also have one here that says, what lessons did you learn about how decision-making works in a complex organization?
So actually, this is a good question. We had a regional field director quit for some reason, and so that's like a huge piece of the campaign, right? And I honestly wasn't really in a position to go and be like a leader, but Brittany really is a great person. So she filled that role, and so she was doing something that's sort of like mid-tier in the campaign, having to learn people's names, their backgrounds, what they're doing, how to best serve that area, while also running the rest of the state. So seeing sort of like that dynamicism and people being able to sort of on the fly plug themselves into a situation and how they handled the stress was, I think, very beneficial.
Great. Let's see, do we have any other questions? I'm not seeing any at the moment. All right, so up next, we have Caitlin Reber, who worked for RAIN. So Caitlin, tell us about your summer internship.
Hi, yes, I'm Caitlin. So I was lucky enough this summer to intern with RAIN, which is the Rape, Abuse, Incest National Network, and it's the largest anti-sexual violence organization in the United States. The organization has over 200 employees working out of DC. Obviously, my internship this summer was fully remote, so I was working from home, and it felt a little different, obviously, than if I were going into the office, but I definitely still learned a lot about the organization, nonprofit work in general, and then public policy work at a nonprofit like RAIN. So just to start and give you an overview of RAIN as an organization, they have 4 main goals. First, to educate. RAIN provides a lot of public education materials about sexual violence, and so they're a major source for media outlets looking for commentary on sexual violence issues, which have obviously been huge in the news recently. And they collaborate with people in the entertainment industry as well to provide advice and insight on shows or movies depicting sexual violence so they can create accurate and the least harmful content possible. And RAIN also has a lot of social media accounts, so they share a lot of information, statistics, and resources for survivors or people looking for more information. They also have a speakers bureau, which is where I was interning. It's a network of over 4,000 survivors who applied to be members, and then RAIN connects the members with speaking opportunities in their areas across the US, which includes testifying in front of lawmakers to help their policy team, which I thought was really interesting. And obviously right now with the pandemic, there weren't a lot of speaking opportunities for members, so we kind of had to be creative. So there were a lot more like Zoom events at colleges and things like that. Secondly, consulting. RAIN's consulting team does a lot to help train RAIN's staff who work on their hotlines and also organize trainings at other organizations and institutions. And they have leading research teams in sexual violence issues. So they're able to provide really great expertise to different organizations for which they provide training. Third, victim services. RAIN runs 2 national hotlines, the National Sexual Assault Hotline and the Department of Defense Safe Helpline. So RAIN has volunteers who really run the hotline and specialists who work the phones, and they also have online hotlines to help survivors across the US. And RAIN works with local sexual assault providers to ensure that survivors have access to services in their area as well. And the DoD Safe Helpline is a hotline available to members of the DoD community. So members of the military, veterans, if they work in the DoD, that's where they're gonna go. And RAIN has helped more than 2.5 million survivors through their National Sexual Assault Hotline alone. So it's a huge part of RAIN's work. And then their 4th main goal is public policy. So RAIN has a dedicated public policy team of only 2 members, I believe, right now, which is crazy because they handle all the state and federal work that they do to end sexual violence through changing state and federal laws. And they also maintain a database of up-to-date resources on sexual violence related laws in every state. One of their biggest policy initiatives is ending the rape kit backlog. So that's really their their biggest effort. So for me, since I was an intern with their Speakers Bureau, I wasn't in their public policy department, unfortunately, but I was in their communications department. So I got to see a lot about how RAIN is run, a lot of nonprofit work, and how the different departments interact and kind of intersect in their work. And so the communications team obviously does a lot with all the other teams. I think public policy or consulting really couldn't do what they do without the communications team because they kind of get the word out there. They're the ones who are in contact with the media, the entertainment industry, all of them. So it was a really unique experience for me because I wasn't really interested in working communications and didn't have a background in that or nonprofit work at all. So a lot of what I did was there was a lot of content creation for newsletters. I created an entire newsletter, and then throughout the summer, I was helping brainstorm ideas for other future newsletters. We conducted a lot of research on topics ranging from sexual violence related issues to nonprofit work and professional development. There were 3 Speakers Bureau interns. We helped manage their Speakers Bureau database and like vet new applicants. So it felt like a lot of administrative work, but it was definitely a good experience to kind of see how, again, nonprofits are run, especially one as large as RAIN. I thought that was really unique. And again, even though I was in the communications department, I got to interact a lot with people in other departments, and I got to meet with some people on the policy team. And so two of the bigger things that I did over the summer, I had 2 projects. One of them was a group intern project with all of the communications interns. We wrote an article for one of their newsletters about navigating Title IX policies and policy changes during COVID, which I thought was really interesting and obviously more policy based. So we actually got the article published in one of their newsletters, which was really exciting. And then we created social media plans and press plans for this article as well. And then I got to do an individual project, and I actually wrote about how the Speakers Bureau helps RAIN's policy team get their policy initiatives passed. And so that was really awesome. I got to interview a survivor of sexual violence who had testified in front of Virginia lawmakers, and I think earlier this year she did that. And her issue that she was helping advocate for was more sane nurse, which is sexual assault nurse examiner, accessibility in Virginia specifically, but obviously they're working on that in many states. So that was really cool. I got to speak with one of the members of the public policy team to talk to him about what their initiatives are, how the communications team and the Speakers Bureau helps them. So that was really awesome. That might be published in one of their newsletters, but I'm not sure. So I definitely learned a lot about how RAIN's run, RAIN as an organization. I definitely was interested before this internship in working in a nonprofit in a policy capacity. And I am glad that I got to see other sides of nonprofits, because I feel like I'm a more well-rounded candidate now, knowing what communications departments do and how they interact with other departments. So yeah.
Thanks, Caitlin. Well, we already have some questions here for you. There have been news stories about an increase in domestic violence during the lockdown. Does RAIN have any evidence of that problem?
So RAIN doesn't deal much with domestic violence. There is another nonprofit who does that, but in regards to sexual violence, I know that they saw a huge uptick in calls to their national sexual assault hotline, especially for minors. So that was a huge, huge thing. They published an article about it, and the president of RAIN spoke about it as well. So they definitely have been seeing an uptick in calls, especially for minors who are stuck in bad situations at home, which is very unfortunate, but I think they do have data to support that.
Okay. And how did the organization make decisions about different priorities?
So it's the way it's set up. There was the president, and then there were VPs for every department. So what I gathered was it was kind of like the president would consult the VPs, and then it would kind of go down. I didn't get to see a lot of that. I feel like it was really crazy. When I was there, there was a lot of transitioning, like new VPs, a lot of new VPs. And like I said, the policy team lost a few members like while I was there. So then they were really short staffed, but I think they really prioritize their hotline. So I know like with the communications department, if there's going to be like a documentary coming out, there were a bunch that came out this summer that were sexual violence related. The Surviving Jeffrey Epstein, or the Filthy Rich documentary, Athlete A, I believe, as well on Netflix. There were a ton. And whenever those types of documentaries get released, and the communications team usually works with a lot of the people in the entertainment industry, like I said, to consult with them. So they kind of know first, and they have to let the hotline know, because the hotline will get an uptick in calls when things like that are released. So they definitely prioritize their hotline, and I feel like the departments all work together really well to make sure that everything runs smoothly and that the hotline's not too overrun, because it's really volunteer run. They do have specialists and hotline managers, but it's a lot of volunteer work. So.
Great. How do you think the communication skills you gained from this experience can be applied in your future career in public policy?
That is a great question.
And that comes from one of our professors, Professor Alvera. So yeah, that is a great question.
I think it's really applicable. I think it's good to know, especially if I want to go into nonprofit work, what the other departments do and how to best interact with them. I think I got to do a lot of like social media management, which I hated because I'm not a huge fan of social media, and like I have some of it, but like I'm not really on it a lot. But I think it was good to see what people on social media were saying like about RAIN, because they would get a lot of comments, and sometimes there would be criticisms of RAIN and the things they're doing. So I think that was interesting to see, and I think that helps I know like what people's perceptions are of RAIN as an organization, and I think that would be helpful as like working in public policy, to know what people think about your organization. I think that's really important. but yeah, I think it would be it's going to be a very beneficial experience to have this background. It is definitely different. But I do feel like it helps me be more well-rounded as a candidate for jobs in the future. I got to do a lot of like article writing, things like that. So yeah.
Excellent. Well, you definitely had a different experience and one that gave you some new skills. So thanks so much, Caitlin, for that presentation. And we look forward to seeing what you're up to next. I know I've heard some stuff that you're looking into, and so we're excited to see where you go. We're going to try to get Caroline back, and if not, we have some contingency plans. So let's see if we have Caroline. Caroline, are you with us now?
Hey, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Hi.
Okay, I called back on my phone.
That's great. Okay, so we have your slide up, so whenever you're ready.
Should I start over from the beginning again, or just jump? Because I know we're kind of at the end of the time.
Yeah.
Should I jump in like to just the responsibilities?
Yeah,
like
start
what
with
I did?
internship responsibilities.
Okay, cool. So as I said, sorry again with my issues, my Wi-Fi's been like down. We called Verizon yesterday, but like I don't know what's going on. But so again, I worked for the Institute for Public Policy and Economic Development over the summer. And while there, I did a bunch of different things, which I really liked because, like I said before, I still wasn't really sure like what I wanted to do. And with a sociology background, I was kind of like, I had a lot of interest in like the social field. So the first thing I did was I conducted research on the longitudinal effect of redlining in Wilkes-Barre, PA, on present-day real estate prices and neighborhood racial composition. And for those who don't know, redlining was something back in like the 1930s that was part of the New Deal that FDR created. And basically he wanted to encourage people to buy houses in order to like help the economy after the Great Depression. And redlining is when they, in the house deeds that people, like when people buy a house, in the deed, it states like if a certain race can own or live there. And basically they did that to create like white neighborhoods, and they didn't want people of color living there. And we found like the longitudinal effect on that was actually like nowadays, obviously it's illegal to redline in like anywhere, but houses that were redlined in like neighborhoods that could only have white people still have higher real estate prices now and higher values on the houses. So that was one thing that was the first project that we did. And then the second thing that I did was I looked at census data for Head Start programs in school districts in northeastern PA. And basically I found demographic information for people and students in those areas. And then the next thing that I did was I live in Reading, PA, which is like about 2.5 hours outside of State College, and it's a pretty rundown city. And there's a university, it's like near the city called Alvernia, who commissioned the Institute to collect data for them because they want to put classrooms down in the city, try to like revitalize it and bring more people to the area and like help like businesses. So they had me collecting information on like infrastructure downtown. And then I also created policy briefs. I did a policy brief on economic policy following, like how to revive the economy following COVID-19. So like I said before, I did like a number of different things while I was working for the Institute. Usually the internship is in person, but because of COVID, I had to do it remotely. And I actually really enjoyed it. I felt like I didn't lose anything from the experience. Like I learned a lot. I liked how diverse it was, and it really showed me like how diverse I feel like the public policy field is. Like as we've seen with all the presentations today, like everyone kind of did like things all over the map. And I felt like this was just a good experience for me because it gave me like a diverse amount of things I could probably end up doing with the degree. And just some key learning experiences I had was old policies can have everlasting effects on present day legislation and life conditions. Like I said, with the redlining project, it's crazy that policy made back in the 40s is now still affecting real estate prices and neighborhood and racial compositions. I also learned that programs that receive federal funding of any kind are required to have regular needs assessments conducted in order to evaluate their effectiveness. I mean, it makes sense. That's why I was doing stuff for the Head Start program. Like any program like that that's receiving federal funding, they need to be checked. Like data needs to be collected on their effectiveness every so many years in order to keep receiving said funding. And then lastly, policy can only go so far when it comes to enacting meaningful change. It takes the efforts of local organizations and institutions as well. I really like, when I looked into the history of the Institute, they started because Wilkes-Barre wanted to revitalize their city, and a lot of local businesses, industry, higher education institutes, nonprofit organizations, they came together and like paid for the Institute to like make this happen. And I like how Alvernia University is kind of trying to do the same thing in Reading. So those are my key takeaways. Like I said, it was a great experience. My preceptor, Jill, she was great. She helped me a lot. Like she was really helpful. I think that's everything.
Great. And let's see if we have any questions for you. What was the most surprising thing that you learned this summer?
Most surprising, I have to say the redlining project that I did. Like I did a lot of like I looked up like literature reviews, and like I had to do research on that, and I really did not know that was even, like I didn't even know what redlining was, and like the fact that it's still affecting like neighborhood values and compositions is just like astounding to me. Like I had no idea. I would say probably that project.
And what do you think what's something that you can take away from this experience that'll help you as you transition into a professional career?
I would have to say that I think it showed me like what I would want to do. Like I think that I would like what I want to do with this degree is work for like someplace like the Institute, who like I just like how diverse all the projects were. Like I think that I would want to work in an environment where we're being asked to do like a variety of different like things and responsibilities. Like I like that I could collect data myself and be on site and stuff like that, but then I could also be conducting research and using census data. Like I like that I was doing like a bunch of different things, and I think that's what I want to do in my own like career in the future, is something like that where I get to do a diverse amount of work.
Great. And we have a question from another one of our faculty members, Emily Paktigian, asks, how does the Institute disseminate their work to the broader community?
I'm honestly not exactly sure about that. Like they, a lot of times they get like commission, from what I believe, they get commission from like other like businesses, like institutes, programs to collect data for them, and then they give it to them. I'm not sure. I'm honestly not sure how like they present it to the community. I'm not sure about that. I'm sorry.
So that might be their end of it. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Great. Well, we're so glad we were able to get you back with us, Caroline. And we want to thank all of our students for presenting today. And we want to thank all our preceptors for being able to work with us so quickly to enable all of these internships to take place virtually. We have Chris Whitco, our Associate Director, with some final remarks. And thank you again, everyone, for hanging in there. We know we're running a few moments behind. Chris, take it away.
Okay, thanks, Whitney. And I think Lillard might have a word or two after me. Is that right? Yeah.
Yep.
So I want to thank, I want to also thank everybody for joining us today. This is a really big moment for our program. This is our first group of students, you know, ever. So this is really a big deal for us. And one of the best things about the job of being a professor is to see your students take what you teach them and then go out in the world and do great things. And we've seen that here. I had to look this up, I'm not gonna lie, but it says on our website, we're developing the next generation of problem solvers and leaders. And I see our students doing that, turning into problem solvers, turning into leaders, and I'm impressed. And I think you guys should be proud of yourself, because you really have done a great job. And it's really thrilling for me to see this. And I know Lillard and everybody else feels the same way. So I wanna just applaud you, and especially in these difficult times where, you know, things were chaotic, things were hectic. But you'll find that being flexible and being adaptable is also really important as you go out there into the world. So I just want to say I'm impressed. You guys did a great job. You should feel proud of yourself. Take a few minutes tonight or this weekend and just reflect on what you've done, because it's impressive. And yes, thanks again to the preceptors. We couldn't obviously do this without you. And of course, thanks to Whitney with her great work here, and Catherine for putting this together.
So thanks, Chris. I agree completely with what you just said. It is so gratifying to see these things. There's a couple things too I want to point out, which was gratifying both as someone who's taught statistics and policy analysis before. I love seeing how data had such an impact on so many decisions in so many different organizations. So that was great to see, and to see that those things like learning R and learning, you know, the various kinds of statistics that you had in your classes last year mattered for many of you in your organizations. The other thing that I thought was really impressive that I like to see is how many people were dealing with tough ethical issues that are oftentimes right at the edge of where society is right now. And that's one of the things we always see in policy. So certainly issues around, when we just heard redlining, for example, and we heard Adrian talk about some issues with students not having as great of outcomes in terms of you know, some of the students who are not getting the great learning outcomes out of some of those programs, and the kinds of things that they could do to fix that. And so when we think about the Black Lives Matters movement and the demand for ethical and fair and just treatment of all Americans and all citizens, and you know, everyone in our community, what an impact that has, that we have students working on those issues and bringing things in from the classroom to these organizations. And then when I think about the broader missions of these organizations, what an impact that our little bitty, I mean, we're not very big yet. We're still a new group. This is still our first time. Like Chris said, this is such a big deal for us to have, you know, our first set of students go through this. But to think about the outreach that this had on so many different things. I mean, we heard about, you know, Wisconsin, and we heard about programs in DC and programs in our own state, and we heard about everything from domestic violence to redlining to you know, organizations that are trying to you know, make a difference in a variety of ways in our communities, including the fish and wildlife types of things. And so that's just very gratifying for all of us to see that. And I know I speak for all the faculty in saying, you know, we want to congratulate each of our students on what you've achieved, and it's going to be so gratifying for us to watch you going forward, being the leaders that Chris just mentioned in the field. And so thanks again to the preceptors for the great work they did. Thanks for everyone who participated here. And for those of you first year students that are watching, we look forward to this next year. Hopefully we can be in person and maybe enjoy some cookies and lemonade along with the with the talks. So thanks again, everyone, and again, thanks Whitney for what you did to run this, and thanks Catherine. I know every one of the students would want to also have me thank you for what you've done with the internship throughout the summer. You've had a huge impact on our program and on our students. So thanks again. I think that's it. Whitney, are we ready to close then?
That is it. Thank you,
Okay.
everyone, so much for joining us. And we are recording this, and we will be posting it on our website in case we want to share it with anyone. So thank you so much, everyone.
Yep. Great. Thank you.